Hey, it's Future Tom here, and I have a few things I need to tell you guys. First of all, Dice Tower Con has a new website. It's really good. There's lots of information about Dice Tower Con there. You definitely want to check it out, but you really want to check it out because Dice Tower Con is getting close to being sold out. It's not sold out yet, and the prices for tickets are going to go up February 15th. So if you're going to buy a ticket, if you've been delaying on it, you're going to want to do that as soon as you possibly can. So go to dicetowercon.com. Secondly, there's 3 new podcasts in the Dice Tower Network. You listen to us. There's a lot of other podcasts you can find out. You can find out about all of them at dicetowernetwork.com. But we have Board Game Blitz has joined us, a group of women who are talking about games and being involved with games. Very similar to that is Our Turn podcast, who do the same thing. They say that they're pulling chairs up to the table and inviting everyone to join in the conversation about games. And finally, the Family Gamers. This is a husband and wife who are talking about games from a family perspective and teaching them to their kids. All 3 of these links will be in the show notes. Go check them out. Go listen to them. Welcome them to the Dice Tower Network. All right, Eric, I'm done. Do what you need to say.
Hosting for the Dice Tower is generously provided by Cool Stuff Inc. Cool Stuff in stock at coolstuffinc.com. Thanks for your support. The Dice Tower, episode 494.
The Big Impact.
Welcome to the Dice Tower, a podcast about board games and card games, and especially the people who play them. On today's show, Scott shares the biography of a big tower of wood. Brian takes a closer look at a famous cube tower, and Jackie visits the Oracle of Delphi. Plus, we have tales of both horror and amazement. We answer a question from the mailbag about running a school board game tournament, as well as some other questions. And we look back at the games that had the biggest impact on our lives. I'm Eric Summerer, and here's your host, the Times New Roman of board gaming, Tom Vassell.
That doesn't make sense, Eric.
It's a font joke. This is for all the font fans out there.
So you're taking Impact and going to Times New Roman?
I am. Yes, indeed.
Eric is the Comic Sans of board
You
games.
take that back.
I'm sorry.
You take that back.
The whole Comic Sans font
Comic
thing
Sans.
makes me laugh all the time because I've seen people get more angry over that than over like real problems in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. Sometimes it looks silly, but I don't understand the absolute rage when it shows up.
Right. It's like, again, I can understand, yes, it doesn't look professional, blah, 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 yeah, blah, 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 blah. But people get really angry.
Yeah.
And it makes me laugh. Well, folks, our fundraiser is over, I think. And I think it went well.
Otherwise, something went wrong if it's still going on.
Super early. Well, I think because we have in-demand funding on our thing, that if you still wanted a Dice Tower, you can go in and grab one as we're putting things together. There's no more stretch goals, no more stuff, but if you want to jump in, that's something Indiegogo lets you do. So I signed up for it, so it might still be going on. If you're like, what? There's a fundraiser? I still want a promo pack? You could probably still go get one.
Oh, cool.
But we are working on that, and we'll talk no more about it because I said we wouldn't. So our 500th episode is coming up.
It's getting close.
What did I say was the end of the contest? February 15th?
Yeah, it's next week.
That's right.
So 495. This is the last
time I'm talking about the contest. If you send us a subject in an email and send it to dicetower@gmail.com, and in the email header 500 reasons, right? You can tell us your favorite moment from the show. You get an extra entry if you actually cut that moment out. If something that you would like to see change in episode 501, even though I pretty much have decided what we're doing at this point, but it doesn't hurt to have my what I'm doing affirmed by everybody else. And what was the other thing? Oh, if you wanted to say something or record something for our show, realizing, of course, that most of those we're not going to be able to put in the show just for time purposes. We're going to be recording our show live at Gamma, not like in front of an audience live. Actually, we still don't know how we're doing it. I think
we'll figure something out.
I think we'll just record in that room that we recorded everything else.
Probably.
But we're going to bring in the first co-host of the show, Joe Stedman. The second co-host of the show, Sam Healy. Eric.
Yes?
And Z will be there because, why not?
Yeah, sure.
And maybe some other people. When I say maybe some other people, feels pretty confident we'll be. If there's one place we're trying to get people to show up on our live podcast, that's it.
Okay.
But we have to not tell some publishers that we're recording at Gamma.
Yeah.
So that they don't
if you run into any publishers, don't tell them.
Right. There's no reason to spread this.
Right. And of course we'll be live streaming during the course of Gamma, so it'll be hard to keep the secret that we're recording.
We're not live streaming the podcast though.
Right.
Are we?
I don't think so.
That'd be interesting now. That'd be too hard. All right. Don't put these ideas in my head. Tell me about something small.
Sure. Let's
talk
about
something huge.
Duh. Tiny Epic Galaxies, the expansion, Into the Black. This is an upcoming expansion for my favorite of the Tiny Epic games that I've played a prototype component version of. I haven't played with the final ships and stuff. But Tiny Epic Galaxies, the dice-rolling space exploration, planet-conquering game. The Into the Black expansion adds a couple of cool things. One is an exploration deck. There's a sort of a special deck of circular cards that are planets, and you can send ships to this location in order to flip up the top card of the deck. And that may be a good planet that can earn you some cool stuff, or it might be a nasty planet. And if it's a good planet, you can choose to keep it or press your luck and draw the next one from the top. But if you get one of the red cards, you're stuck with it. And often those red cards steal resources, do nasty stuff to you, force you to do like a mini conquering of that planet before you can take the card. It locks down your ship for a while, and that can be a little nasty. But that's interesting. There's also an area majority aspect to this, where there are symbols on the bottom of these cards. And at the end of the game, if you have more of those symbols than everybody else, you'll get additional points. The other new element to this is that they add pilots to the system, where you can recruit these pilots using combinations of dice. And now one of your standard ships becomes a specialized ship that now has a permanent power that maybe when you land on a planet, it steals resources from your opponents. Or when you advance this particular ship in trying to colonize a planet, it moves more efficiently, moves double instead of single spaces with each die. And now you're sort of, you've got these specialized pilots and you can play to their strengths as you choose different actions in the game. I really like that aspect. However, I do not recommend trying to implement this expansion unless all of the players are quite familiar with the system. Because now these pilots show up in a row that is equal to the number of planets that are available for colonization and action selection. So in a standard game of Tiny Epic Galaxies, you've got, say, 4 or 5 of these planets that are out there. And so you've got 4 or 5 actions that you're looking at and possibilities to colonize. And for a new player, that's perfectly fine. You can process that without too much trouble. But if now you've doubled that, not only do you have the planet powers, but now you've got the pilot powers to worry about, that I think is too much for a new player to understand and to process. I made the mistake, because I really wanted to play the expansion, I made the mistake of playing with new players. And it slowed the game down, at least doubled the length of the game. And no, you don't want that. You want people to be familiar with the system, familiar with at least most of the planets from the base game, and so you can just focus on the new mechanics, the new material. I wholeheartedly support this. I'm excited to see the final version of it, but just don't play it with new players. Play the base game first, then move on to Into the Black. But still, thumbs up for the new expansion for Tiny Epic Galaxies, and looking forward to seeing it soon.
I don't know if you've got me excited about it or not.
It lengthens it a little bit. But if you're looking for a deeper experience, this is a good way to do it.
All right, well, I'm going to talk about a mega game called Assault of the Giants.
Ooh.
This is a game from WizKids. So I don't know why that slipped my mind there. Andrew Parks is the designer of this game, and it takes place in the Dungeons & Dragons universe. And in this game, you are going to be a race of giants, fire giants, frost giants, storm giants, hill giants, stone giants, or storm giants. And there's a big map of this land, and you have a bunch of discs that you have that are different giants that you're moving around and conquering areas with. But you also have two very giant champions who are moving around. They just look cool, right? You can buy the set with either painted miniatures or unpainted ones. And so, in this game, on your turn, you have a handful of 9 cards. And you play a card in front of you, and that card gives you an action, and then the next person goes, and every once in a while you play a rest card, and you get all your cards back in your hand, and you can keep going. This is not a new concept. This has been done in games before. But what I like about this game is that when you play a card in this game, it will then give you a bonus to that action based on how many cards you've played before it, or sometimes after it. So it might give me 3 recruitment points, plus 1 recruitment point for every other card I've already played to the left of this card. So if you play it on your first turn, you're going to get 3 recruitment points. But if you play it on your 4th turn, you will get 6 recruitment points. So the later you wait to play different actions will make those actions better. Except, you can't wait till later for all of them. And at some point, you're going to want to play that rest card to get these actions back. Other than that, it's pretty basic. You're moving around. You are trying to accomplish different missions on the board, trying to control different areas. Each giant is very different. Like the hill giants are tiny compared to the other giants, I guess. So they're easier to beat, but there are fewer victory points when you do beat them. The game is victory points. Every time you kill enemy giants, you get points. Accomplishing missions is points. When a certain number of points has been bypassed, the game ends. Also, every time you rest, you move 3 really small miniatures. They're normal human beings. They're giant killers. You move them around the board and try to kill opponents' giants with them. Their names are Hook, Line, and the third one is...
Sinker?
You are right. So it's actually pretty fun. It's like a 90-minute to 2-hour game. And it's, kind of a dudes on a map style game where you're rolling dice and fighting each other. But you're also... This card play is really intriguing. It feels different, and each giant race is going to play differently. Because some of them can have more on the board, some have special ability. They all have some sort of special ability, and they're all doing different things. Like, I played the Hill Giants, and my goal was to eat. Which I was like, wow, this is like a special ability I can get into. So that's Assault of the Giants. I really like it so far. It's from WizKids, coming soon.
Let's get small again. We're going to talk about some flowers. This is Lotus.
Game.
A very pretty game. This is from Renegade Game Studios. And you are laying out cards that form flowers. And there's different, suits, different types of flowers in the game. Some of which only have 3 petals, and then others, I think the largest is a 7-petal flower. And the way you play the cards, you sort of lay them out, and there's frames of how you're supposed to do it so that it becomes a nice flower arrangement when you have completed it. And they're all spaced out just right so that the images match up and you end up with a nice little flower. On your turn, you are allowed to play 2 of these cards. And actually, you are allowed to play up to... How does it go? You can play a number of them if they're the same type. That's what it is. You can play as many of one type of flower as you have. But you can play 2 individual cards if you have different types. And you are also putting down your figurines. Actually, you're not. You have butterfly figurines that you can add to these to increase your presence on a particular flower. Because once the flower is complete, then there's an area majority sort of thing, and whoever has the most influence on the flower is going to score points. But also, you can decide to forego your scoring of points in order to upgrade and get a special power. So you could get an additional butterfly, you can increase your hand size, stuff that's going to help you throughout the game, but you are foregoing those points. And if you do that too much, you will not be able to keep up if other players are scoring as often as you. It's a light game. Certainly, it's basic card game, but it's got some choices to it. It's certainly beautiful. I enjoyed my play of Lotus. I was not very good at it. I got smoked entirely when I got to play this. But it plays like in half an hour or so, and it's very pretty. I could see playing this with family members. It's a good one. Lotus. I liked it.
Yeah, I still have not played this one, but I'm certainly intrigued about it. All right, my number 2 game I'm talking about today is RoboRally. This is not a new game. This game originally came out in 94 or 95.
This is edition number 3 of this, correct?
No, it's more than that.
It's more. Yeah, there were several versions early on.
There was a German version and things like that. This is what I think we could effectively call the cheap version.
Oh.
And by cheap, I mean that Hasbro goes out of their way sometimes. Like, hey, they're sitting in a meeting and the guy's like, hey, we're constantly being criticized for our low quality. Can we get worse? And the guy's like, I'll work on it, sir. Like, good job, intern, do it. There are tokens in this new RoboRally game that are paper, almost.
What?
Like, thick paper tokens. It's just really it's really not good quality game. But you can get it online for a very inexpensive price. So there's that.
Yeah.
So what they did is this is actually the biggest change in RoboRally they've done in a long time. It's still essentially the same game. But in the original RoboRally, there was one big deck. Everyone has robots, and you're trying to get the different checkpoints. And you would draw from a deck of cards, and you would program your robot. Of course, someone else might push you in the middle of your movement, which caused you to get all messed up. Ha, 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 ha. Well, this new one, each person has their own deck of cards. Which is good, because you have your own distribution model for cards. One small component problem, these cards are what Eric lovingly calls Hobbit cards, because he got that from Ryan Sturm,
I did
200 episodes ago. But they're really small, and they feel really, when you're using cards to program and you have a hand of cards, I'm okay with little cards in different situations. Not for a hand of cards. And they're not even, the Ticket to Ride cards were little, remember them? But these are not good quality, and they're small, which is a bad thing. But it is nice to have your own cards. And when you take damage, you put cards into your deck. So it's kind of like a deck worsening game. Not deck building, but these cards will show up, and then they will cause you to do random things. So in the original RoboRally, you would shut down to heal life. Now you just basically deal with these cards as they come up. They're called spam cards, so there's other cards that are worse. Other than that, you move around. You now can get energy cubes on the board, like the same kind of energy that you pick up in King of Tokyo. And you can use these energy cubes to buy upgrades. And you can start buying upgrades from turn 1. Although Richard Garfield made a post on Board Game Geek where he talked about what he really wanted the rules to be and what Hasbro eventually published, and his rules were slightly different. So I may go back and try his rules. But as it was, the gameplay is fine. I like the changes a lot, and yet I'm not keeping the game because it's that bad of quality. It's so bad I cannot keep it. I already have a good quality RoboRally.
Yeah.
Now, it's the same thing. It's the same feeling, right? If you did not like RoboRally, this ain't going to change your mind.
Okay.
If you didn't like how you carefully program movement and someone knocked you out of the way. Now, if your main reason you didn't like RoboRally was because when you shut down to heal and then people pushed you over the board and knocked you around and shot you, if that was your main problem, well, they fixed that, so that's good.
Okay.
But they still do the stupidest thing. What's the biggest mistake people do when they're playing RoboRally for the first time?
They put too many flags and too many boards on the table.
Right. And this book comes with maps, and I was like, oh, great. They're not going to put any of those big maps. No, there's a lot of them in the book. There should be a big stamp that says, only try this if you are currently residing in a place where you're going to be stuck for 10 hours. People do not learn. Although we played this hilarious scenario. There's one board that has 4 conveyor belts that go in circles on the board. And you put the checkpoints on these conveyor belts.
Oh, great.
So the checkpoints are rotating around. So you got to hit the checkpoints. but you got to do it when it's in the right spot.
Ugh.
Halfway through the game, I was like, hey, let's just do 2 checkpoints. And everyone's like, yes, good idea. It was a small board.
Yeah.
But hitting a moving checkpoint is harder than you might think. Actually,
Yes.
I don't think it's easy. So it's as hard as it sounds.
I think it's pretty hard.
I still do love the game. I think it's a great game. I'm just very disappointed in component quality. I like the changes they made. I'm thinking about trying to see if I can crib together some sort of like decks for each person.
Right.
Like
I was actually wondering that because I've got the middle version, the previous version as well, and wondering if you could split up the major deck of cards into equal decks. You'd have to worry about the execution numbers because, but
there's other things too. Okay, right. For example, there's a card that gives you an energy now as your action. There's a card that says again, it's the same as your last action. There's there are cards upgrades you can buy that put new cards in your deck, which is cool.
Yeah.
But yeah. You know what? It isn't the end of the world. I'm not going to cry not playing a new version ever again. If you've never played RoboRally, it's a cool way to get in, and I like it. But just realize you're getting a very badly put together game that I had to go out and hunt on my own because Hasbro decided it was more important to send me Pokemon Monopoly.
Yeah, I was considering picking this up, and now you've sort of turned me away from it. I love RoboRally and would like to try the new mechanisms, but
I would go look
really
at an open copy of it, Eric. Maybe the component quality won't bother you, but if you go online, you will see I am not alone in my comments.
Yeah. Great. Last for me, don't have to complain about component quality here. This is Me Want Cookies.
The food games were last episode, Eric.
You're right. I should have rearranged things.
Try to keep it in perspective.
Me Want Cookies is a kids game from Yellow. From, I believe, La Scorpion Mask is the design studio behind this one. You have a deck of cards with sort of spaghetti drawings on them. There are 6 different desserts. There's a donut and there's a piece of cake and all sorts of things. They're all represented by these big chunky wooden pieces. You put those in the center. And then on the cards, you've got these dessert symbols as well, but they're all connected to each other with very squiggly lines. And there's actually 2 different decks, difficulties in the game. So you've got some easy cards where the spaghetti's not, terribly complicated. You could find from one end to the other end pretty quickly. And then there's more complicated cards, and you can mix these together in whatever arrangement you want in order to adjust the difficulty. You could play all nasty cards. You could play with maybe 1 difficult card on the table at a time, whatever. So you roll a die, and the die is going to display one of these desserts. And you have a number of these cards now in a row on the table. So if the die has a donut, I need to, without touching anything, go to the first card, find the donut, trace that line to the next dessert, which is maybe the cake. And then I go to the next card, start at the cake, and follow that line to the next dessert, and then go to the third card and follow that to the last dessert. Wherever it ends, I have to grab that token before anybody else. And if I'm successful, I get that card as a point, and you play until you've scored 5 points. I really like this one, and it's a fun one to play with the kids because it's all pretty tense, and you can adjust the difficulty a little bit, make the adult close their eyes for 2 seconds before they open them and start. But it's a lot of fun and keeps everybody really engaged and tense and tracing things with their eyes and good times. It's simple for sure, but the pieces are cute, nice chunky wooden tokens to grab, and it's one that you can adjust the difficulty depending on who you're playing with. And really have a good time with it. Good, solid family kids game. Me Want Cookies from Yellow.
I really do like this game.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the last game I'm going to talk about is called Villages of Valeria. Now, I mentioned this in my review of it, but I'll mention this here too. I really, and because I do know publishers listen to our podcast occasionally, so here's my tip of the week. What was my tip last week? It was put a picture of your game in a box, right? Good, yes. This week, you don't have to name all your games the same word because it's confusing. Like, there was a game called Valeria Card Kingdoms.
Yep.
And there's a game coming out this year called Quest for Valeria. And this one's Villages of Valeria. But they're 3 different games.
Yes.
And if you get one, you may think it's the other one. Or an expansion for one.
Uh-huh.
I don't understand why you would deliberately confuse your purchasers like that.
Right.
I know that you're trying to tie a theme together and everything, but I don't know.
Well, they might be going for, say, you've got Catan, or the Settlers of Catan, and then there was the Rivals of Catan. And there's another Catan card game that, they all have similar words in them. They're just following that example.
I think it's a bad idea. I really do.
I agree. I thought this was an expansion to Valeria Card Kingdoms at first.
It's not. But it is a good game, okay? Daily Magic does a good job. Valeria Card Kingdoms was very similar to Machikoro. Villages of Valeria is very similar to A Lighter Race for the Galaxy.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, you've played Villages of Valeria?
I have. I played it on the cruise.
You talked about it on our show?
I did. On the cruise episode.
Oh, I wasn't listening in that episode.
No, you were confused by the rocking of the ship. I get it.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. All right, well, just a quick recap since Eric has already talked about it, even though no one listened to our cruise episode.
Yeah,
The Villages of Valeria, each turn you take an action. Your action can be drawing cards in your hand, getting some money, playing cards from your hand by using resources, and each other player can do the same action as you. It's just not as good as your action. Very similar to Puerto Rico and San Juan and those style games. And that's pretty much the whole game. I mean, there's a little bit more to it than that. But you're using cards as resources. You're using coins. There's a kind of an in-game economy that works really well. It's fast. You get points for the different cards you buy. You can also get workers who will show up in your town. If you have the right types of buildings, they'll come and they'll also give you points. It takes about 30 minutes maybe. And I really enjoy it. Fantastic artwork. It's good. I wish, for my sake, this is only Tom Vassell, I wish there was a little bit more meat on the bones of this game. Like, you could start building an engine up. You're like, woo, wait till you see my build action now. Oh, game's over? Oh, well, it would have been cool. Because when you build certain buildings, they make your actions better.
Right.
But the game ends quickly enough that sometimes those cool things don't really come into play. And the buildings are all pretty generic for the most part. They have there's some minor changes between them. And that's fine. It's a great game in that regard. I want to add, I need like the Gamers expansion for me, I think.
Well, maybe they will come out with an expansion and just make it more confusing. It'll be like Villages of Valeria, the Kingdoms of Valeria.
No, Kingdom Quest.
Yes. Villages of Valeria, Card Kingdom Quest of Valeria.
Well, no, we're still waiting for the game. Right now, the holder of bad titles is the Mystic Veil of Magic, I think. I don't know who approved that name for that expansion.
I didn't know that's real. That's real?
Yeah, the expansion for Mystic Veil is Mystic Veil of Magic.
Wow.
Of course, then there's things like Agricola, All Creatures, Great and Small, expansion, or more animals.
More creatures?
Oh, yeah, more creatures. And then there was Galaxy Trekker, the big expansion, and Galaxy Trekker, another big expansion. These name things get ridiculous sometimes.
Sure. Well, they're just going for a theme.
Anyway, Villages of Valeria is a fun game. I do enjoy it. I don't know how much Eric enjoyed it because I was rocking.
I enjoyed it as well. I agree what you're saying. It does seem to end pretty quickly. It is on the lighter end of things, but so was Valeria Card Kingdoms, I think. I think they're comparable in weight.
Yeah, they are. And again, this is not a bad thing. I think a lot of people are really going to like it.
Mm-hmm.
It just, for me, it's like a 7.
Okay.
That's still pretty
solid.
Good. All right, also a 7 for me. That's not true. 6? Maybe a 5 even. I'm talking about Jenga.
Which is solid.
Presenting Biography of a Board Game with your host, Professor Scott Rogers.
Today I want to talk about a game that really stacks up to the competition. The dexterity game, Jenga. Leslie Scott grew up in the Republic of Ghana. There she played a stacking game made from the wooden blocks bought from the local sawmill. While attending college in England, she brought the set of the blocks to play with her friends. They loved the game, and Scott realized that the game didn't exist as a commercial product. Even though she didn't know anything about the toy business, Scott commissioned 100 copies at a small woodworking shop in Yorkshire. She christened the game Jenga, which in Swahili means to build, and took the game to the London Toy Show in 1983. Jenga is a dexterity game consisting of a tower built from 54 wooden rectangular blocks. Players take turns using one hand to pull one block at a time from the tower and place it on top. The game ends when the tower topples over. Scott was convinced Jenga would sell well, but when she arrived at the London Toy Show, she found it dominated by video games. Despite this change in the market, she made a single sale to the buyer from the London department store Harrods. Out of the blue, Scott received a call from Robert Grebler, the brother of a friend who had played the game in college. Grebler put Scott in touch with Irwin Toys of Canada, who licensed the game. Irwin then licensed the U.S. rights of Jenga to the toy company Shaper. Not long after, Shaper was purchased by the American toy company Hasbro. Hasbro marketed the game under their Parker Brothers brand and published it in 1986. Hasbro loved everything about the game, except for the name. Scott recalls, "Well, they said it was a great game, but it had a lousy name, and I thought very hard about the name. I had deliberately not chosen a descriptive name like Tumbling Towers. I had this idea that when you said Jenga, everyone would think of the game and nothing else." Her persistence paid off. Hasbro kept the name and eventually sold over 50 million copies of Jenga. Hasbro created over 11 standard editions of Jenga and over 20 different licensed versions of the game, including Hello Kitty, Transformers, Spider-Man, and Harley-Davidson motorcycles. Scott even got the last laugh on video games with Space Invaders and Donkey Kong versions of the game. For a game as simple as Jenga is, it's fascinating to see how many different variations of the game there are. 1986's Throw and Go Jenga and 1995's Jenga Ultimate both incorporate dice that corresponds to a color of a block that the players must remove from the tower when that color is thrown. 2000's Jenga Truth or Dare has questions printed on the blocks, which players have to answer as they're pulled from the tower. 2003's Jenga Extreme, and that's Extreme with an X, has an intentionally slanted blocks that make stacking the tower even more challenging. Jenga Boom from 2012 has a platform that contains a ticking timer. When the timer goes off, it drops, causing the tower to collapse. 2013's Jenga Quake has a similar platform that periodically vibrates. A few Jenga versions are Jenga in name only. Jenga Max from 2009 has players attaching plastic pieces to a tower, which creates a crazy balancing mobile-style structure. And the Angry Birds Jenga Death Star game from 2012 isn't about building a tower at all, but rather knocking one over with plastic representations of your favorite Star Wars characters in Angry Bird form. Giant versions of Jenga are quite popular at conventions and are available for purchase under the name Jenga XXL and Jenga Giant. Just be careful not to crush your fingers when removing those 18-inch long blocks. Jenga has also been recreated as a video game. The Jenga World Tour was published by Atari for the Wii and the DS in 2007. An updated version was published by Electronic Arts as part of their Hasbro's Family Game Night Volume 2, and an iOS version was released by Natural Motion Games in 2010. Jenga's influence can be felt in other stacking and dexterity games like Junk Art, Rhino Hero, and Terran Meeple City. Wherever there is a tower that can collapse, you'll always find somebody happily shouting, Jenga!
Until next time, this has been Biography of a Board Game with your host, Professor Scott Rogers.
And now, another tale of board gaming horror.
Oh my, that's horrific.
Gather round, children. I decided to create a board game Go box to carry around with me. It was quite an impressive effort, putting the likes of Takinoko, Onitama, Splendor, Beastly Bar, and Codenames into one box, along with a few other games. I also put 2 Magic the Gathering decks into my Go box. My deck was in a deck box featuring Pikachu, while my friend's deck was in a deck box featuring Jace. This becomes important later. I brought my Go box to church, since I do most of my gaming there. I'm very good about keeping my stuff under my supervision, as younger children often run wild in the halls and the rooms. However, right at the conclusion of the afternoon service, I realized that I had left my Go box unattended for several hours in one of the rooms. Once this thought dawned on me, I ran into the room in question to find the various components of the board games I had so carefully packed, strewn about the room. Cards, bits, and game pieces were scattered about as if a minor tornado had gone through my Go box. More importantly, I realized that the Pikachu deck box was missing. Apparently, as Pokemon is very popular among the elementary kids at church, one notorious troublemaker had stolen the Pikachu deck box. As generic as these deck boxes are, that Pikachu deck box was particularly important to me as a close friend of mine had gifted it to me. After resorting all of the components to make sure nothing else was missing, I was told by the kid's mother that the deck box would be returned to me the following week. I suppose this should be a tale of outrage, but it's my own fault for leaving my stuff unattended. Plus, I hope I can make this a teachable moment and impress upon the kid how important it is not to steal. But until it's back in my possession, there will be a deck box-sized hole in my heart.
I don't really know what to say here.
So he still doesn't have it back?
Well, maybe he does by the time we've...
I hope so.
I don't know.
I don't know. Sometimes you have those situations where, if once it's in the hand of a kid, I would put the odds a little lower at getting it back. Because then, the next week comes along and the kid's like, oh, no, I forgot it. Oh, I know exactly where it is. It's in on my shelf. And then the next week, I had it on the shelf, and then we had to move. I had to clean my room, and then I had to move it, and I'll bring it next week. Not cool.
Well, I was more like if the kid had thrown the stuff all over the room.
Yeah, what's up with that?
He didn't even he was like, oh, wow, the stuff was thrown around, but something was stolen. I'm like, yeah, but also, everything else is thrown around the room.
How do you know you're not missing something?
Your game components with respect.
Yeah. Wait.
You shut up, Eric.
So you just, okay.
No, I always think, it's like, I'm telling you, it's that nightmare scenario where Laura's really mad at me. I come home to find all my game boxes outside, and I walk in the room to find a 5-foot-high pile of cubes and other assorted chits. That would probably make some people go off the deep end.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of work. I guess not a lot of work. If she didn't take stuff out of the baggies.
Yeah, but what if she did?
Yeah, that would be...
I wouldn't even know what went into each game. You'd have to get all the instruction books.
Oh, yeah. Oh, especially, the cubes and, all the generic components.
Look, I know what it's like to drop one game and sort out one game.
Yeah.
Mixing two games would be a nightmare. Mixing 350?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's you're like, all right, chuck it. Starting over.
Yeah, just get a shovel.
All righty. Well, we've heard about Jenga. Now let's hear about a game we talked about in our last episode. Huzzah.
Several times.
Welcome to Culturally Old, where I discuss games we may have forgotten about or games that failed miserably but still had some good mechanics in it.
He's Brian Counter, and everything he does is counterproductive.
Today I wanted to talk about Wallenstein, or as Americans would pronounce it, Wallenstein, designed by Dirk Henn in 2002, rated rank 7.5 and 254 on Board Game Geek. Wallenstein looks like a dudes on a map area control thing, and it kind of is, but it's much deeper than that in a great way. Everyone starts off with the regions they control, with cubes, literally, and in this long game, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Players vie for control of places on the map and regions, while going for victory points by building castles, cathedrals, and markets, buying more cubes to reinforce an attack, while getting money by taxing and ticking off the natives, and getting them to produce food for you while ticking them off as well. One of the best parts of this game, in my opinion, is the cube tower, which you pre-fill with cubes, and that's how you resolve conflict. When players go to an open area, they have to take over the native farmers who get a little ticked off, and you'll chuck green cubes in the tower, and you may lose some troops out of that. Once it's yours, if someone else invades you and you haven't ticked off the natives enough, they'll actually defend for you, and any green cubes that come out of the tower will count on your side. You see, if 6 cubes come out of the tower when I invade someone else who has 5 cubes, and a prior cube comes out that's been lodged in the tower and it's 6-6, everyone dies and the areas are desolate. Otherwise, it's whoever comes out with the most cubes, you eliminate one by one in Civ-like fashion, and that's how many are left over, and that's how the board changes. What's interesting, it's not a Risk-like game where you try and consolidate all of your troops or regions into one big mass. In fact, if you do that, you're probably not going to win. You have little pockets of areas you control in little clumps all over the board. It's important to protect areas where you've developed castles, cathedrals, and markets, because those are your victory points. However, at the same time, if you keep raiding your little territories for taxes and for food, they may revolt on you. And so I've seen players that tax the crud out of an area or take their food, and they just kind of abandon it because they know that they're going to be revolted against, or they'll leave one guy in there, whatever. Now, this is a horrid way to govern real people, mind you, but this is a game. And there's many more details in this game I'm not going to necessarily cover for the sake of time. But that's the crux of how it works. Most victory points wins at the end. Now, this game was re-implemented by Shogun with a different theme, of course, and a different map, and a bidding for turn order thing, but essentially the games are the same. Based on personal experience, people who like one game typically like the other. It's mostly the map preferences. My experience tells me those who have more aggressive personalities like the Shogun map because it forces people to war on each other more. Those who are more slow and thoughtful, like myself, prefer the Wallenstein map, but they're still both very good games. Now, Shogun is easier to find and cheaper than Wallenstein, but I can recommend both if you have trouble finding a copy of Wallenstein these days, which now has a second edition, my understanding of which is it just implemented that bidding for turn order thing that Shogun implemented earlier. So if that sounds interesting, consider Wallenstein.
Mr.
Vassal, yes. Do you have any superpowers?
Are you really working on Nothing Personal, Junior?
What are your top 10 candy bars?
And now the Dice Tower will authoritatively, definitely, possibly, maybe answer your questions.
Tom, which way to the bathroom?
Chris says he was watching some videos and he was struck by something. He said when he grew up, there was a game was published by a company. It was always published by that company, unless for some reason somebody else would buy them out. That same company is going to own that game year after year after year after year. Nowadays, it seems like games can bounce from publisher to publisher with no real reason or pattern. He says he can understand if a game's introduced by a small publisher, then a big publisher picks it up later, fine. But why is my copy of Carcassonne published by Rio Grande, but now Z-Man? In Tom's Days of Wonder Top 10, he mentioned Colosseum's out of print, but now someone else has it. Days of Wonder Asmodee's huge. Why would they give that game up? Is it the publisher's choice, the designers, shareholders, etc.? Well, it's different in every situation. But first of all, this is not something new. Cosmic Encounter is a good example of that.
Yeah.
That game is 40 years old now, and it's had, 9 publishers? When a publisher picks up the game, there's some sort of contract to how long they have the rights for. Sometimes the rights revert back to the designer, and in that case, if the designer's like, I really want my game to be published, and someone else offers to do it, they will.
Right.
Publishers will not indefinitely print a board game unless they feel like it's going to consistently make them money, which most games will not do. Most games have a certain saturation point, and then they're done. But in the case of Carcassonne, for example, Carcassonne was put together by Hans im Glück, right?
Correct.
Hans im Glück over in Germany. They had a deal with Rio Grande. For whatever reason, that deal fell through, so they picked it up with Z-Man Games. That's it. That's basically what just happened there. The contract ran out with Rio Grande, and they decided to move over to Z-Man Games. Maybe Z-Man Games made them a better offer. I don't know all the details. So, technically, the same game has been on that box. It's been Hans im Glück. You're just seeing a different co-publisher in America. Colosseum sold a decent amount of games, but didn't even come close to Ticket to Ride, Shadows over Camelot, etc., and so Days of Wonder did not do a second reprint. Now that they've been bought by Asmodee, Asmodee's not interested in any game that doesn't sell a bajillion copies. Mm-hmm. So the rights revert back to the designers, and I'm sure Tasty Minstrel approached them and said, we'd love to reprint this.
Yeah.
But that's really what it is. You know, another company will pick it up because the rights have run out or the game's been out of print for a while, so another company will put it up. It's not like they're bouncing back and forth all the time. If someone has a hot game, they're hanging on to that game.
Right.
Unless in the case, there's also a few cases where you lose the license. Decipher at one point lost the license for Star Wars. It went to Wizards of the Coast / Hasbro. So they had to stop publishing Star Wars Decipher, you know, the CCG.
Right.
So things like that can happen. But for the most part, you're not seeing games that bounce too much. And if you see a game published by 7 different companies, that means the game like will have a surge of popularity, and then no one buys it, so that company stops doing it, and then another company picks it up.
Right. And who knows what decisions, you know, what informs a decision as to whether they're going to continue publishing a game or not. That all changes based on the company, its resources, how much money it has to sink into another print run. It's an individual decision per title. And if a company decides not to reprint a game, it's only fair that the rights revert back to the designer after a certain amount of time so that they can try and sell it to somebody else.
You know what, though? Also, a lot of these companies think there's like a gold mine there. Oh, if we only reprint this game, we'll sell the gazillion copies.
It's true.
They usually don't. Usually reprints of these older games do not, do that well. They do okay. People are like, but it costs $400 to buy that game on eBay. Yeah, but there's not more than maybe 5,000 people who want that game. Now, that may be enough to warrant a reprint.
Right.
But very rarely will you see a game get reprinted and then continue to stay in print. It has happened, but very rarely. Like Coliseum, for example. I'm sure it will do okay and well. There's people who want Coliseum. But I don't think you'll see it be in print for more than a year or two. I might be wrong. I'd be glad to be wrong.
Micah says, I enjoy acquiring and playing new games on a semi-regular basis, like once every month or two, not every game night. But I have a couple of people in my group who don't like learning new games. They don't even know all my existing games, so from their perspective, I've been forcing them to learn new games all the time. From my perspective, though, I'm not getting to try new experiences nearly as much as I'd like, and I'm constantly deferring to them to play Cosmic Encounter or Sentinels of the Multiverse yet again, which are, to be sure, great games. And I feel like a jerk when I more forcefully insist on playing something new. I could just not invite them in order to get my new games played, but then I feel like a jerk because I excluded them. So, to summarize, what do you do when someone in your group consistently says they only want to play games they know and don't feel like having to learn something new? What is the kindest and most socially acceptable approach? Or do you even encounter this much?
Do I encounter this much? All the time. But here's the deal. My group's big enough where it's not a problem. The people who don't want to learn a new game don't play with me. Now, if Micah did not really kind of give an idea of how this game group is. It like at his house?
Right.
He said he could invite them. What I would do, and this is what I've done before, I'll invite people to my house, I'll put up a thing, and I'll say, but just so everyone knows, we're learning new games. They could be bad. They could be good.
Right.
They could be wonderful. They could be pieces of rubbish. But you don't know. And then some people will be like, okay, I'm not interested in that. And they don't come. And if they do come, they cannot complain because you told them beforehand what was going down.
Right.
And that's what I would do. I would say, special day where we're playing new board games. Do you want to be involved? Let me know.
Yeah, leave it up to them. Let them say yes or no, I'm interested in doing that or not, rather than, excluding them from the invitation. But I think it is important to, do a little trade-off as well. If you're going to do a game night that's all new stuff, make sure that there's a game night where you do get to play the classics and the favorites as well.
Justin says he likes our podcast and he needs some advice. He teaches a board game class at his high school 2 days a week after lunch for 50 minutes. Last semester he had 20 kids, and this semester he has 39.
Nice.
I like that he has a whole class to do this. It's not a club. It's a class, Eric.
Cool.
Anyway, he currently has mostly filler games, since the 30 to 45-minute playtime seems to be the sweet spot. He says, I need some ideas for how to handle this amount of students and also make sure they're having a blast. How would you structure this situation? This is what I would have had done. I would put together big games. For example, Ink and Gold. Ink and Gold is only an 8-player game.
Mm-hmm.
However, you could split the, what's the say is 39 kids. You could split them into 5 groups of 8. But you're drawing the same card for the whole class. And then each group decides if they're going to run or not. And you can like put certain jewels on the tables. You just get some counters, whatever. And you can make that one game cover 40 people. You could play RoboRally. Put it up on a projector. Split the group into teams to do that. You could take one game, teach it, and then instantly put it out there. What I would do is I would bring in 20 abstract strategy games, like every third time, and teach them one at a time, and then say, okay, you have to play a tournament and make a tournament up with each one. Okay, who you playing next? You're playing Bob in this game. Well, Bob's not available because he's playing Sally in that game. Okay, no problem. When they're done, come see me and I'll sign you in your next tournament. That's what I did. I had these big tournaments that they would go through. And they would be playing through these games in different tournament brackets. And so, okay, what game are you in next? Oh, you're over in this game over here? Fine. Then go over and play that one. And everyone, and I usually made like double elimination or something, so they had to play multiple times. They would play at least twice in every game. And you can make that last a really long time. Well, and then I would play a big giant game of Wits Wagers, but, you know. So
if you were doing, an abstract strategy tournament or something, how many copies of each game would you have to track down?
I would only have one copy of each game. I would bring in like 10 different games. And I would tell the kids, if you're not in a game, then you should be watching a game. I would randomize. This is what I've actually done this. I didn't do it with 39 kids. I did it with like 20. But I would randomize. I print out tournament brackets. I randomize starting kids. I'm like, all right, Billy, you're playing Susan on this game. Rachel, you're playing so-and-so in this game. And then it would take some, running around for me like, okay, Johnny, you want to play a game. You're free now. Okay, well, let me see which games are open. And I had a clipboard. And any game that would open up, I put on top of my clipboard. And then I would go through names until I found 2 people who were not in a game currently. Okay, you guys go play that game.
Okay, so you've created the bracket, and now you've got 16 games that need to be played at some point, 16 matchups. And whoever is available for the open games, you would just, we've checked that particular matchup off. Sort of a long-term tournament.
Right, and the only time that I ran into problems is like if a couple smart kids start winning everything, or if you find a kid who's super slow, and you can't move farther in the bracket till they play their game. I got to the point where I would say if you missed school, you lost any games, I would call you out in that day. Because otherwise, if someone would miss a few days, the brackets would fall far behind for them. Like, all right, well, we can't go any farther
until Mitch gets to play his games.
Right. So I'm like, Mitch, if you miss, you're gonna lose the games you're in. And yes, I know you're sick, but too bad.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
But that's what I did. That's what worked for me.
That's cool. I mean, you at some point you want to have the self-fulfilling aspect to this, where you don't have to be teaching constantly. You have sort of a critical mass of people who know enough games that they can teach each other.
Right, but things like Pentago, you can teach really quickly. That's why I did a lot of these short abstract strategy games.
Right.
Because I could teach them really fast, and then the kids are, going back and forth. It's pretty easy. And they also usually play pretty short. So like I would say, okay, Pentago, it's a best 3 out of 5 match because it's really quick. And you guys are playing Blocus over here, and you're doing this over here. It worked really well. In fact, at the end of the year, I gave away most of the games to the kids because some of the kids would find there would be certain kids who'd be like, "This is my game." They would find a game they really liked.
Cool. Speaking of working with kids, hey kids, what's it time for?
Bringing up the Meeples
with Dr. Max Davey.
Welcome to Bringing Up the Meeples, where we invite child development and games over for a cup of tea and a nice chat. Emotional resilience is broadly the ability to roll with the punches and not succumb to negative emotion in response to stress. It's a popular concept in psychology, and with good reason. Promoting children's resilience is one of the key strategies for decreasing the mental health problems later in life, which are causing so much concern around the world. Resilience is a complex business with roots in social, emotional and family factors, and any single intervention will only have, at best, a modest effect. But it is worth asking whether playing games might have a small role here. Most research into building resilience had focused on teaching children emotional skills directly, talking through situations and examining children's thoughts and responses verbally. Now, these have generally positive results, but they're mixed and not very impressive. And I wonder if one limitation of this approach is that they actually teach resistance in quite a passive way, without giving the child the opportunity to practice and refine these skills. The Australian psychologist Robin Homrek has used therapeutic games to reinforce and embed the learning about emotional resilience from these kind of programs. Now, Homrek's game is themed directly on experiencing and coping with emotions, and directly teaching about emotion is one of the 3 levels on which he's shown that he can promote emotional skills. But in fact, the other 2 levels of learning are not specific to his theme, or indeed to his game. Firstly, the kids can learn by interaction, basically learning to cope with the possibility of failure, as well as the inevitable disputes over rules and cheating. I had a lovely experience of this recently at the games club I run at my kids' school. It was really busy, about 10-20 kids, so I couldn't supervise all that well. An argument broke out over some herbs in Adventureland. I was just about to abandon my teaching of Sushi Go when a voice rose above the tumult. And it was the voice of our most argumentative member, the only boy I've ever had to ask to leave a session. And he was making a deal. He smoothed over the problem and the game continued. Maybe all those times it's been going wrong, he's been learning. Maybe he just grew up. Probably a bit of both. But in any case, it was a great feeling. The final level of learning identified by Homrek is mediated learning. That is learning by the demonstration, instruction or example of an adult. As the adult at the table, the main thing you need is patience, so you can stay calm and guide kids towards solutions they have come up with, rather than take control, shout over everything and impose a solution, because that doesn't teach them to operate effectively in situations of stress. Now, I'm getting better at doing this with my games club. With my own kids, not so much. I guess I need a little resilience practice myself. So what should you do if you're playing with a child who's struggling to cope with the emotional stresses of gaming? The first thing is to choose your game. If you're going to have to take that element, make sure that the choice of who attacks who is constrained. So for instance, King of Tokyo's King of the Castle mechanic is great here, or a mechanic that forces you to target the person in the lead. The other thing to be careful of is voting or negotiation. Anything where players could potentially bring in personal feelings about each other can be a bit of a minefield for fragile children, or indeed adults. So if you need another reason to avoid apples to apples, this is it. But the most important thing, as an adult, in this situation is to keep calm and keep at it. We know that the more time children spend in shared family activities, the better their emotional development. So unflip that table, pick up the scattered pieces, take a deep breath and smile. This is Max Davey with Bringing Up the Meeples.
Tales of Amazement.
I live in Europe and travel to Australia to see my family once a year for Christmas. Every time I bring lots of games for them to try on the hope that a couple of them will be a hit, and hopefully one day they'll start playing heavier games with me. After much research, looking for games that they'd love, especially real-time games, I ordered a bunch of them from Amazon. A few days later, I got an email saying the items had been automatically returned because they couldn't find the address. Strange. I had received another order from Amazon just days earlier. I decided to order them again, only to receive an email a couple of days later saying that the items had been automatically returned due to damage in transit. Okay, third time's the charm, right? I ordered them yet again, knowing that I still had 2 weeks before my flight, and the estimated latest arrival date would be a week before my departure. On the due date, I got an email saying that the items would arrive 3 days late. Then, on the 4th day, I contacted Amazon and they said that the items were caught in the Swiss customs, and at this stage it was obvious I would not get these items in time. After explaining the situation to the Amazon customer service lady that I was missing Christmas presents, she offered to priority post them free of charge to Australia. The games arrived before Christmas and were a hit with my family. We had a board game-filled Christmas and created awesome, happy memories of quality time together. There's nothing like quality time with my family. Huzzah!
I think I'm trying to make up for every bad tale of horror.
Yeah.
With a great story that makes you just say, hooray.
Here's where everything actually worked out. Good job. It's nice when customer service actually does what they're supposed to do.
Well, let's hear about a Feldian game and then get to the question of the week.
Let's get under the hood and see what makes one of our favorite games tick with a board game Biopsy.
Hello, I'm Jackie. Welcome back to Gaming Biopsy, and today I'm going to talk about a quite new game by one of my favorite designers. The designer is Stefan Feld, and the game is The Oracle of Delphi, published by the always great TMG Games, which, while they usually publish games designed and first conceived by other companies, always do a great job at keeping the production pristine. Their games are always very good looking, very functional, and that was also the case with this one. Stefan Feld is one of my favorite designers, and on this game I didn't know what to expect. I knew it was different, but let me tell you, it was indeed very unique. First of all, contrary to what made him famous, Mr. Feld decided to make this game into a race game. You are not trying to get a certain amount of points, there are no end-game scoring condition, no in-game scoring condition, but simply up to 12, depending on the game length you choose, up to 12 conditions that you need to achieve to win the game. If you do it first, you win. That's all there is. The theme is generic, as it usually is for him, although in a couple of occasions he did something more thematic than usual. But you are generally traveling around a not geographically recognizable Greek sea, trying to kill monsters, dedicate statues to the gods, and things like that. There are 4 different tasks that you have to complete multiple times with different colors. The main mechanic in the game is an action selection based on dice. There are a few spins on this compared to what he did before. First, instead of using numerical dice, he uses custom dice with symbols. This might appear only a cosmetic difference, but actually this influenced him into his relation with the colors. All the colors are connected in a circle, and you can modify the dice by moving them along this circle, so that a yellow has an easy time becoming a red, but not as much of an easy time becoming a blue. You do that by spending favor tokens, which are basically the currency in the game. So, a dice action selection. The actions are determined by the dice you roll, but you can manipulate that. And a very simple one at the core. You have a menu of actions, 8 different ones, connected to the color. So you use the color roll on the die to move, or you use it to load the statue or a good for offering, or to unload the statue of the good in the right place to offer it. It plays fast. It's very different, again, from what you're used to. There is, of course, an efficiency nature. He is, after all, the master of the Euros, but it's not a point collection kind of thing. You can get a couple of bonuses, but you get your bonuses by doing what you do to try and win the game. I was very positively impressed with that. I am curious to see how it holds up to repeated playing, but I definitely suggest you check it out. Oracle of Delphi from Stefan Feld. Whether you like him or not usually, I think you will enjoy this one. Have a great one, Jackie.
It's time for the Dice Tower's Question of the Week, sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., in which our team of gaming experts answers one of your questions, thus increasing the odds that someone will get it right. This week's question: what game had the biggest impact on you?
Hello, this is Mary Prasad, aka Dicey Chic, and the game that made the biggest impact on me was probably Magic. It's certainly the game we spent the most money on, but it's also the one we got the most serious about. And I still enjoy it today. I've probably played this the most outside of maybe Teach You. Yeah, so Magic.
Hey everyone, it's Mark Zielinski, and the game that made the gamer, well, that's going to be Avalon Hill's Luftwaffe. It was one of the first 2 war games that I played in my life, and they were so awesome. It just turned me into a war gamer, and it expanded me beyond the realm of family games, and so it made me the gamer I am today.
This is Professor Scott Rogers of Biography of a Board Game. And what game made the biggest impact on me as a gamer? That would have to be Dungeons & Dragons. I first learned how to play it in around 1979 or 80, and I almost immediately became a dungeon master. And from that, I learned how to design games and levels and how to balance out challenges for players, which eventually led to my very long career in video game design. I wouldn't be the game designer I was today if not for that early exposure to Dungeons & Dragons. So thanks, Dungeons & Dragons, for helping me become the game designer I am today.
Hey, this is Paul Owen of Dice Tower News. The game that had the biggest impact on me was Midway by Avalon Hill. This was my first war game, and really my first hobby game of any kind. Fundamentally, it changed the role of board games in my life from something that you might do to pass the time on a casual basis to a real focused activity, a center of attention, something you would plan to do ahead of time and think about and read about when you weren't actually playing the game. From war games to role-playing games to Euro games, for me, it all started with Midway.
It's Roy Canay from Epic Gaming Night, and for me, it's the post-apocalyptic version of Dungeons & Dragons, Gamma World. My dad used to run this for me a ton as a kid, and it definitely shaped my taste for thematic and narrative games in my board gaming hobby. So for me, the game that had the most impact on me for gaming is Gamma World.
Hello, Luke from the Broken Meeple, and I've talked about this in my podcast many a time before, but sorry Eric, don't scream at me, but Citadels is the game that made the biggest impact on me, because for a long time I was into RPGs and Warhammer games, and I didn't realize that board games had really come that far or could deliver something new to the table. And then I played Citadels, and suddenly I saw this whole concept of the role selection and more ways of developing tactics and interacting with other players, and I don't know, it just opened my eyes to what other board games could possibly exist. It was a while before I eventually got into board games properly since I played it, but that was the trigger point when I started to realize, you know what, board games are good now.
Luke, I'm delighted that you enjoyed Citadels as much as you did, and that it's been so influential. It's been influential for me too.
Was Pinocchio, his nose would have just grown.
Oh no, I'm delighted. So for me, I actually have 2 answers to this. You've already heard my Pokemon story, but I think that's true. That's probably the most influential game for me entering the hobby, because it introduced the concept of a lifestyle game, or of a game that required some investment, not only of money, but of time and, looking up decks and looking up strategies and testing decks and really playing a game multiple times and becoming very familiar with it. And that also led me into game stores, hobby stores, places to buy Pokemon cards, which introduced me to a whole new world of designer gaming. So that certainly was a gateway for me. But also, I think very influential for me is a game called Ninja Galaxy, a game I've never played. But this podcast I listened to was giving a copy away, and I entered the contest to win this game. And in the PS, the postscript of the email, I said, hey, I'm a voice actor, and if you ever need any production work, I'm available. I wasn't working a lot at that point. And the rest is history.
I'm about to cry.
Yeah. That was our first meeting, except for that one time that Tom posted on my blog about Pocari Sweat.
Pocari Sweat. That sounds like such a disgusting drink.
Not bad.
It actually is pretty bad, but it's not sweat.
It's Gatorade without the flavor.
Yeah, that is what it is. Ninja Galaxy, I was sitting there like, how is Ninja Galaxy an influential game for you? There's so many games that have been influential for me over time. And I really struggle because there's just a lot of things. So I think the game that like changed my life the most, probably Fortress America. Because not only did I sit and play the game a kabillion times, and I was like, wow, here's a rule book that I had to figure out on my own, and then play this game, learn the strategies of it, but, you know, I then used the pieces to make other board games and design my own board games. And it maybe the tie for that would be very similar to what Eric said, but slightly different. And that would be Axis and Allies Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
Because I went online looking for a review of that game, which led me to Board Game Geek. And that was a rabbit hole from which I never recovered.
You're still trying.
Because I was like, what? There's more board games? Let me read more reviews. What? They added geek lists? I must write some.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there was just so much on that website, and I got on early enough that I'm like the, you know, when you back the website, you can see how many times you've backed it. The little ribbon, and I think I'm at 14 years in a row now.
Wow.
And that's just kind of cool. It's exciting because that site really did change my life.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we are crossed hairs with Board Game Geek. We're both streaming from the same location. We prefer if you watched our channel than theirs. You know,
I mean, if we're going to express a preference, yes.
Right. But, man, Board Game Geek just really brought this into the limelight, and it's because I looked up Axis and Allies Pacific.
Yeah.
You know, up to that point, I've been like on the internet. I found different places reviewing Axis and Allies and things like that. Board Game Geek, I was like, wow, there's a lot of information about board games here. I'm going to learn some more about this.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think we could do a whole geek list on this sometime. A geek list, see what's happened.
Yeah.
We could do a whole top 10 on this.
Probably.
This issue at some point. But I think today we'll end the show.
Today we'll end the show. Oh, no,
Yeah.
today we'll end the show. I got it.
What did I say?
You said, I think today we'll end the show. Like, this is it.
No. We will end the show at this point.
Okay, that's probably a good way to put it.
We are taking too long to end this show. So, until next time, because there will be a next time.
Yay.
I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Eric Summerer.
And you've been listening to The Dice Tower.
Thanks for listening. Promotional consideration has been provided by game publishers in the form of review copies of games. This episode number 494 was recorded on January 26th, 2016. Coming up next week, we push the Wayback Machine to unknown levels with our top 10 games from 20 years ago. This podcast is sponsored by listeners like you. Thank you for your continued support. And speaking of support, the Jack Vassell Memorial Fund is dedicated to providing support to members of the board gaming community in their hour of need. If a catastrophic event has become more than you can handle, find out how we can help at jackvassell.org. The Dice Tower is produced by Tom and me, with assistance from Jason Thompson, Itai Perez, Eric Matthews, and Rob Searing. Bovine Nautical Freight Services provided by Cattle Ship. Timothy Pinkham composed our theme, and hosting is provided by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games at great prices at CoolStuffInc.com. Let us know what you think of the show by posting to the Dice Tower Guild at BoardGameGeek.com, following the Dice Tower on Twitter, or by emailing us at Dicetower@gmail.com. And don't forget to visit the other shows in the Dice Tower Network, including Boards and Swords, Flip the Table, On Board Games, The Party Gamecast featuring The Party Gamecast, Board Games Insider, and Board Game Blitz. Find out more at DicetowerNetwork.com. Until next time, from all the gang at the Dice Tower, have fun gaming. That would have been a surprise, though. Oh, by the way, we're done.
Like a sneak ending of a show? And by the way, this is the final show.
Yeah. They kill us off in the middle of the episode.
That'd be a great April Fool's joke.
Totally new cast next week.
Yeah. Well, maybe that is happening.
Maybe. Who knows? You do. I don't. Dice Tower SVU.